So thank you very much for joining us this morning on this important topic about our beloved Patagonia Mountains and what's going on with the Hermosa mine and what we can be doing as an organization and all of you individually to try to stop this project and raise your voice to support and protect the Patagonias. I'm Louise Mistel. I'm the executive director at Sky Island Alliance, if we haven't met before. And I want to take a moment to acknowledge that the Sky Island office where I am today in Tucson is on the land of the Tohono O'odham and Pascua Yaqui and other indigenous peoples. And our work throughout the Sky Island region is on both sides of the border in the US and Mexico, takes place on indigenous land. So we are working to educate ourselves about that, the history of these lands, and want to acknowledge that. Just a quick mention on accessibility. If you need it, you should be able to turn on closed captions. That can be super helpful. I love them myself, so help yourself to that. So today we're going to be talking about what is currently the situation in the Patagonia Mountains with the Hermosa mine. So we'll spend a little time talking about NEPA, the National Environmental Policy Act, and where we're at with public engagement. And also about the beautiful Patagonia Mountains and what we know about them and what's at stake there with this proposed mining project. So a few logistical things. You can post questions in the chat box. We're going to keep track of those and probably pause at certain points throughout the presentation to address them. We'll also do Q&A at the end. So please feel free to pop questions in there. And then you are here, I'm sure, because you want to take action. So we are in a comment period. We're going to talk really specifically about how you can do that. But a couple notes for you as we go through all this information. One is that we will be recording this. And we will share it back out with all of you and everyone who's registered. So you don't necessarily need to take copious notes on things. You can reference this if you need. You can also share it with your friends, which I would recommend, anybody else who might care about this issue. And we will be providing you a link to a pre-populated comment letter. So we've done some of the work for you. You can take that and add to it, but just want to let you know that there's a bunch of tools here we're going to go through. So you'll have some stuff at your fingertips. Let's see, was there anything else? Was there anything else, Emily, that I should mention that you can think of?
I think that's it. I'll pop other thoughts into the chat if they come up.
Okay, and Emily Burns is with us as well today. She is our program director, and she will be covering the wildlife and corridors and various aspects, springs of the Patagonia Mountains to tell you more about what's at stake. All right, so let me see if there's anything else. Okay, so we're going to start with a little bit of overview of the mine project, where we're at in public engagement, and then move to the more ecological pieces, and then back to finishing up on how you take action right now and over the coming year, because this is going to be an ongoing process. So I'm sure many of you are familiar with the Sky Island region. You're here because you love it. Just in case you're joining us from further afield, I will orient us to where we are in the world. The Sky Island region, southeastern Arizona, northern Sonora, a really special place in the world in terms of diversity of life. And the Patagonia Mountains and where this proposed mining is right here at this red dot, close to the border in the Sky Islands. Zooming in a little bit, you can see we're just south of the town, sort of southeast of the town of Patagonia. And this photo is a look at what is already happening in the Patagonia Mountains on private land owned by the South 32, which is the mining company running the Hermosa mine project. As you can see, this is exploratory drilling and other things. There's already been a lot of damage done to the landscape, and they are already drilling and pumping water out. So lots is already happening here, and they are now proposing to do full-scale mining operations on U.S. Forest Service land. So just a little background, South 32 is the company that owns this Hermosa mine project. The couple of the key minerals here are manganese and zinc. This is an Australian mining company. They are currently doing that work you just saw on private land, and they have a number of acres on U.S. Forest Service land, which is where they're looking to expand the project to. So this type of mining requires massive dewatering to get to the minerals. We're talking about 1.6 gallons of water per year for 4 years to reach target minerals. This is kind of mind-boggling, a lot of water. So really big impacts for the ecosystem. You may have heard that this project is the first mining project to go through this new Fast 41 permitting process. This is an act from 2015, referred to as the Fast 41 Act, aimed at improving the timeliness and predictability of federal environmental review. This is the first, as I said, mining project. So in truth, we don't know for sure exactly how this is going to go. This is supposed to make the process more transparent and provide clear timetables. Unfortunately, mining has a lot more harmful impacts than other Fast 41 projects and is very large and complex. So we've already got folks asking for extension to the scoping period, and I expect there may be some changes to the timeline as we go along. Just to note that in particular in Santa Cruz County, Congressman Grijalva and the county have asked for more time for this folks to be able to submit scoping comments because 78% of residents speak Spanish in that county as a first language. And a lot of these materials that have been put out are not in Spanish, they're only in English, which is definitely an environmental justice issue. And the mine plan of operations is 221 pages. So there's a lot in there for people to look at and understand. So let's talk a little bit about NEPA. So NEPA is the National Environmental Policy Act, which requires all federal agencies to prepare what's known as a detailed statement on the impacts of any proposed action that may significantly affect the quality of the human environment. Clearly, a mine is a significant action or an action that may significantly affect human environment. And they can do this through an environmental assessment or an environmental impact statement. This mine is currently on the environmental impact statement route, which is the correct route. So this is a look at where we are in the sort of public engagement process through NEPA. The project was found to have significant environmental effects, and the Hermosa South 32 released the Hermosa mining plan of operations earlier this year. And then the Forest Service, the United States Forest Service, where they are proposing to do these operations on their land, has given the notice of intent to do scoping and opened a public scoping period, which we are in right now. That scoping period ends on June 10th. And this is the opportunity for the public and organizations and whoever has a vested interest in this to raise issues. So the purpose of a scoping process is to, I'll just go back and mention, so you can see in here the next thing coming is the environmental impact statement. So that is going to be the big detailed statement on expected impacts of various aspects of the mining process. And that will be another point in the process where public comment will be sought, and we will be reaching out to all of you and working with partners to respond then as well. And then they are looking at a final EIS coming out February 2026. So once people submit comments on the environmental impact statement, they revise, they come back out with what's known as a final. And then there's a period for people to submit objections. That might be more than you ever wanted to know, but just so you kind of know, it's a roadmap of where we're going over the next couple of years. Okay, so scoping is the start of all of this, and it's really about determining the scope of issues that the agency will analyze. So it's the time to identify issues and resources that the agency must consider when they prepare their environmental impact statement and do all that heavy duty analysis. So basically, we've identified a number of issues. I'll talk a little more about that. And this is your opportunity to bring up issues that concern you in terms of how you love and use the Patagonias, your community, all those kinds of things. We are asking and telling the Forest Service in these comments that they must analyze the impacts to the resources we're identifying and analyze the issues we're raising. So these are examples of the kinds of resources and potential impacts, just to give you an idea, and we'll be covering some of these today for sure. Want to think about water, wildlife, dark skies, how people use the land. I'll talk a little bit too about economic impacts and the nature-based economy in Santa Cruz County. There's certainly health-related impacts and ecological impacts. And we are asking them in scoping to look at direct impacts, so direct destruction of habitat, for example, indirect impacts, which could mean that people can't recreate anymore in the area, or people in the town of Patagonia don't have water, a water source, a clean water source. And then really importantly, the agencies have to look at cumulative impacts as well. So this is the impacts that result from incremental impacts of different actions when added together, basically. So there are other proposed mining activities in this area. There are other actions being undertaken by the Forest Service. So this piece is important as well. Okay, so this is a lot, and we will give you, like I said, we have a template for how you can submit comments. I want you all to know, though, that there is a group, a coalition of organizations being led by Patagonia Area Resource Alliance to put in very detailed scoping comments and to prepare for the expected environmental impact statement. So this group of partners has been meeting for a while. We will be putting in coalition comments in addition to all the comments you submit. And that's really important because that sets us up to be able to object later on and to take legal action if the National Environmental Policy Act wasn't adequately followed. So I just want to say this is a quote from PARA, Patagonia Area Resource Alliance. There really are certain places in the world where mining should not happen. The Patagonia Mountains are part of the Sky Islands, part of the Madrean Pine Oak Woodlands. They're an amazing biodiversity hotspot, identified by scientists as one of the top regions in the world most in need of protection for species survival. That's why you all are here. You already know that, but they are just too important to be mined, processed, and stripped of wildlife and water. Again, this is where we are in the world. So Patagonia Mountains, I'll just talk a little bit about species and then pass it to Emily. Really an amazing diversity of life here. And, you know, they're right at the sort of cusp of the tropical influences of Sonora and the Sierra Madre coming up into the Sky Island region. There's 112 species in this area that are sensitive, threatened, or endangered. We've got some lovely Mexican spotted owls here, which are one of those. There is Mexican spotted owl critical habitat in this area, which has been designated by the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, and at least 300 species of birds that live in and use the Patagonia Mountains. There's some really cool special plants. This is Bartram stonecrop on the left, Huachuca milkvetch and Arizona blue star, all sensitive plants with restricted distributions found in the Patagonia Mountains. And it's really a pollinator hotspot in the world. 600 species of native bees, 300 types of butterflies and moths, and 14 hummingbird species. Really cool, a cool place in the world. All right, I'm gonna pass to Emily. Is there anything we need to address so far with NEPA in the chat with questions, or are we good to go?
No chat questions yet, but please feel free to write any questions. This is all pretty confusing, the NEPA part. So if you have questions, please, other people will have it too. Feel free to ask, and we'll do our best to answer your questions. Well, following what Louise just said about the incredible diversity of the region, one of the things that's so spectacular about the Patagonia Mountains, spanning about 30 miles from the western slopes of the Patagonia Mountains all the way through the Huachucas, is it's one of these places, one of the last remaining places in Arizona that doesn't have border wall separating habitats on the US side from the Mexican side. And in the map that you can see right here, the most recent male jaguar that we're aware of coming up from Sonora into Arizona crossed through this major corridor. We suspect that it likely crossed closer to the Huachuca Mountains. And in 2023, starting in February, the jaguar was sighted on wildlife cameras in the Huachuca Mountains. We documented it in the Whetstone Mountains further north in May, and then again in November. And then it was documented back in the Huachuca Mountains. So we know this particular cat moved north and south. Where it spent the summer, we don't know. And really begs the question, did it move into other mountain ranges? Jaguar is really good at avoiding detection. So it's very possible that it was using other sky islands, including the Santa Ritas possibly, or the Patagonia Mountains. But this group of mountain ranges just north of the border, given the permeability, the ability of animals to move back and forth across the US-Mexico border in this place, makes it a really critical corridor for this spectacular cat. Next slide. Here's a picture of the jaguar that this was from Thanksgiving Day, early in the morning on Thanksgiving in 2023. And for us, the jaguar is an important symbolic species. I mean, this particular cat has incredible importance to us, but also the species is symbolic of this need to protect wide open corridors, to protect habitat, and to keep water flowing and available to these wide-ranging species that are moving across the landscape. So when we think about the Patagonia Mountains, it's truly important habitat for species like jaguar. And if we can protect it for species like jaguar, then we're probably protecting the whole range of other diversity that Louise mentioned as well. Next slide. Well, when it comes to protecting habitat, there's been an interesting change that was published yesterday in the Federal Register as it relates to jaguar critical habitat. So the map that we're showing you here was published yesterday, as I said. And unfortunately, what has happened is a portion of jaguar critical habitat has been vacated as a result of a lawsuit that was started with the Rosemont mine. The Rosemont mine is another mining issue north of the Patagonia Mountains and the Santa Rita Mountains. But that particular mining company went after the Forest Service around their definition of occupied habitat. There's been multiple back and forth, but in August last year, there was a court ruling that ordered the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service to vacate part of the critical habitat. And yesterday, we found out what the result of that is. So I'll talk a little bit more about that vacating, but there's so many questions that often come up about critical habitat. And when I first heard about critical habitat, I thought, great, critical habitat. That means that nothing bad can happen in that area, right? Like that's what we all think. It turns out that's not the case. But what critical habitat is it's a tool that the federal government uses to coordinate within or in between different federal agencies to help fulfill the Endangered Species Act and their responsibilities for conservation. What it specifically dictates is that any action on federal land or requiring a federal permit needs to have a consultation with the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service if it's deemed that the proposed actions are going to negatively impact, destroy, adversely modify, I think is the specific language, critical habitat for any listed species. So next slide. The removal of the chunks Unit 3 and Unit 4B, that's up in the northern part, means the northern corridor from the wetstones on the eastern side, which is Unit 4, over the top, the connection to the Santa Rita Mountains that's been removed from critical habitat. That's a loss of 64th over almost 65,000 acres. I guess the good news is there's still acreage remaining in Pima, Santa Cruz, and Cochise County. But it makes the critical habitat designation in these other places even more important because of the shrinking of the critical habitat. The Patagonia Mountains, as it extends down to the border, are still included in Unit 3. So that's really positive. Next slide. So we're mentioning this context because the Patagonia Mountains are just such an important part of this ring of mountain ranges that are supporting species. And we've got layers of conservation tools and changes that are happening. When we think about critical habitat on the landscape, this is something that there will be consultation expected as part of the EIS process. There will be consultation in conjunction with the Hermosa Mine project. Just to say, typically, even these adverse actions that are proposed where there is a federal nexus, often the development project still can carry on. But the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service will make recommendations about how to minimize the impacts from the activities. So it's unlikely that the critical habitat designation staying in the Patagonia Mountains would prevent the Hermosa mine operation plan for coming to fruition. And what we've really learned about that is that when the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service does their consultation, they're charged with looking at the impact of the proposed action against the entire range of the listed species. And for jaguar, that extends all the way down into South America. So their likely recommendation will be, or their evaluation will be, that this particular mining action won't have a significant impact on jaguar as a whole across that whole range. But of course, we all know that in the Patagonia Mountains, it still may have a very negative impact. That's just something to understand about the complexity of all of this. So focusing a little bit more in the habitat, just to share a little bit more background about the place. Here's a beautiful graphic of this stretch of the border. It's about 30 miles, as I mentioned before, without border wall from the western slopes of the Patagonia Mountains all the way into the Huachuca Mountains, where border wall does start. If you look at the left-hand side, and the photos just illustrate what the habitat looks like in these places, the red bar separating the graphic from the photos, a red bar represents the presence of border wall, either 30-foot high or 18-foot high. But regardless of that height, the bollards are spaced just with 4 inches gaps in between the bollards, which means they're basically impermeable to large mammals like bear and deer and jaguar. The Patagonia Mountains, though, have this amazing stretch where there is no border infrastructure, and that's represented by the green bar. And then as you go down, moving west into the San Rafael Valley, the yellow hatching represents vehicle barrier, which are steel cross pieces like this that prevent vehicles from moving back and forth, as their name suggests, but they're still relatively permeable even to large mammals. And we have a lot of documentation of large mammals moving back and forth across that type of barrier. So we're happy enough with the vehicle barrier. It seems to be working well in the San Rafael Valley, and we hope it stays that way. Okay, next slide. So our organization, through the Border Wildlife Study, have been looking at the community composition of wildlife across the stretch of border. And it's focused on the few miles just north of the US-Mexico border. So it's really the southern Patagonia Mountains where we're collecting these data. And you can see a comparison of the type of taxonomic groups that we're detecting, how it breaks down. Birds are a very significant component, like the gray hawk over my shoulder, that show up on our cameras. And we've been collecting data for over 4 years now. So the goal of our study is to document which species are present in these border adjacent sky islands and the valleys, and look at trends in the community over time, looking to understand if we see increasing numbers of detections of species or decreases as we watch different events and environmental changes on the landscape occur. So the Patagonia Mountains are pretty amazing, and we've detected 92 species. We're still detecting new species over time, and we'll have updates later this year about what's happened over the last year in the study. Next slide. And here's a representation of how we chart what we detect on our cameras in terms of new species showing up. So the cumulative number of species are shown over time, separating out birds from mammals. And you can see the longer our cameras run, in all 3 sections of the border, we're seeing more different species show up. So it may take longer to actually get a jaguar on camera or an ocelot moving back and forth across the border. We haven't yet detected a spotted cat on any of the border cameras, but we certainly know that the spotted cats are in the area. And the longer these cameras run, the better we'll be able to detect changes and also detect the more rare species. Next slide. But as I mentioned, this is only happening at the border. So one of the key pieces of information that we're collecting with the community's help, with many of your help already, is to get monthly data from wildlife cameras distributed in your backyard or wherever you have access to land to mount a camera. You can help develop a checklist for the Patagonia Mountains. And so this is one of our calls to action for all of you, in addition to submitting your scoping comments, is to help support this wildlife camera program. Because what it does is it creates a dashboard that all of us can use to see which species are showing up in the Patagonia Mountains or other places around the region. And it helps us understand whether something significant might be changing in the occurrence of species. If all of a sudden we lose a certain species, they're no longer showing up on community cameras, it alerts us to the fact that there may be an issue and a conservation need for us to address. This is going to become increasingly important if the Hermosa mine operational plan goes into effect. We might start seeing more deterrence of species being repelled from the area, both from direct and indirect impacts. So there's lots of ways to get involved. If you have a camera and you're in the Patagonia Mountains, we have a lot of tools and resources on our website, and Rick just posted in the chat more information about the program, about how you can share a monthly checklist of the animals that you're seeing. The graph that you're seeing in the purple bars is looking at the frequency by which we're seeing different species in the Patagonia Mountains from the checklists that have been submitted so far over the last almost 4 years. And the top 10 species have pretty incredible charismatic mammals that we all love so much. So the number one most frequently detected animal in the Patagonia Mountains is the white-tailed deer. And looks like, yeah, about 205 checklists have confirmed the presence of white-tailed deer. All of the animals that are circled in the green in a green box are part of the top 10. And the top 5 include white-nosed coati, and gray fox comes in at number 2. We have desert cottontails and javelina are part of the top 5. So it's really exciting. Mountain lion is also up there in the top 5. We have a heavy presence of really important, major, iconic wildlife species and mammals. And so if you can collect data and submit it through Photofauna, that's terrific. You can access the dashboard that we have on our website to learn about which species are showing up. And if it's not for you to be able to put out a camera, if you have an extra wildlife camera sitting around, we have a lending library at the Patagonia Library where community members can check out and borrow a wildlife camera for free and help participate in this wildlife monitoring effort. So lots of ways to get involved, and we hope you'll join Photofauna. Next slide. One of the interesting things that we can do with more data collected through Photofauna and also with our border wildlife study is look at the distribution of wildlife species against environmental factors. And one of the issues, just one of many that we're concerned about with mines in general, is the light pollution that the development project brings into often open space that typically has dark skies. So the disruption of the nighttime environment by putting out a lot of lighting for safety and for mine operations that might be going 24 hours a day. If you haven't ever seen this website, you can get lost in it for hours, lightpollutionmap.info. You can go to it, you can change the year. So you could look and do a time series about light pollution in your area or a place that you care about. And it has a pretty simple scale to show where more light is being detected by the VAERS satellite. So more radiance from Earth going up at night. The warmer colors, yellow, orange, and red, represent more light pollution. And then green to blue to dark, no color means more natural, unpolluted skies. Next slide. So we just, actually, sorry, Louise, go back one more, should say one more thing. I didn't orient you to what this map actually shows, but the corridor that you're seeing going from the south to the north is the I-19 corridor from Nogales. You can see a lot of light coming out of the urban area around Nogales and continuing up the 19 corridor. And then the box shows the radiance info, just a trace of how light pollution has changed, a snippet from 2012 to 2023, and that's specifically over the Hermosa mine location. Okay, now we can advance.
Okay.
Thanks. So zooming in a little bit further, the two blobs that you're seeing, one is the town of Patagonia in the north, and the southern one is the location of the Hermosa mine site. And here you can see the intensification of mining lighting that is just over a pretty short amount of time. It's really gone up. And if their operations continue to develop further, this trend is likely to continue. I understand from residents in Patagonia that the change in the town of Patagonia on the eastern side may also be due to mining activity and operations. Next slide. Okay, so the last thing I'm going to talk about is the water. One of the major things that Louise has already mentioned is that there's going to be an incredible amount of water being pumped out of the groundwater in the Patagonia Mountains. It's called dewatering. It's as hideous as it sounds. They're talking about pumping water down from almost 2,000 feet below the surface and discharging it out through the creeks. They're calling this a cone of depression, the area where they'll be working. Previously, these deposits were not mined because they were so full of water, it was not practical. But with pumping technology now, they believe it is possible to remove the water so they can extract the minerals. So the cone of depression is the area that will be most immediately affected by the pumping activities. The dashed circle that you see is a hypothetical representation of what the cone of depression is. No one really knows how far the extent of the area affected by the pumping will be. It's not likely to be a perfect circle, that's been pointed out. But just to give you a sense of the number of different water sources that are actually in this area, the center of this area, and those are indicated by springs, both red and blue shapes are showing where water sources are on the landscape. So I always think of water as it's sort of the tug and pull of water moving through the landscape. When water is getting pumped out, that means it's going to be draining the water source that springs usually are fed by. So if the groundwater is getting lower, we could imagine there'd be less water available to seep or come out of the ground and be available at spring sites. It's one of our major concerns. The other issue is what's going to happen to the creeks when this volume of water is pumped out. And specifically, they're proposing 6 million gallons of water a day going into Harshaw Creek and 172,000 gallons per day in Alum. So that's a lot of water. That's very likely to have impacts. Next slide. This is another way you can get involved. So remember, you can do your scoping comments, you can participate in Photo Fun or support the program, and then come out and support Spring Seeker. Spring Seeker is the program where we work with volunteers and other partners to do routine health checkups on the springs in our region. And here's a scatter shot of all the springs that we have eyes on right now in the region. You can see the Patagonia mountains are down in the center, the southern center range, just to the east of Nogales. So we do have a lot of spring seeker data, which is exciting for this area. So since we found out about the operational plan and the really just the Hermosa mine's intentions to do the pumping, together with Friends of Sonoyta Creek, did a major campaign to survey many of the springs that hadn't yet been given a checkup in the Patagonia Mountains, and 80 were done over about the last year or so. Next slide. So if we zoom in a little bit closer, you can see where the spring sites that we're aware of, where they're scattered around the region, and you can see the direction of flow for Alum Creek and Harshaw Creek. So Spring Seeker is going to help us evaluate how much water is coming out at a spring source. Many of the springs are actually in the drainages of these creeks. It's very common to have recurring springs or springs that emerge from like a river or creek channel. And so we're looking at the dynamic of, as the pumping picks up in pace, at what point might we see a decrease in typical spring flow because the water table is dropping, and then what's going to happen in these creeks and the springs that are in the crosshairs of the water being pumped out. So looking at the water source itself is one key piece, looking at the extent of the aquatic environment and noting whether there's the presence of the typical riparian vegetation, the flora and the fauna that we might expect assembling with spring sites. So change detection is key, and it's going to be really critical to keep eyes and routine health checkups happening on these springs as the project goes forward. The more data we have before they ramp up, the pumping is going to be very valuable for change detection. And these are data that we're going to share back with the Forest Service. We're going to share with the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. So if you're interested in doing spring seeker activities, we really welcome you. The goal is to be checking a few of the springs every week and to get the best baseline data that we can for the springs. Plus, it's really fun to find water. And the more we know about it and find places where there may be snails or native fish, I think the better position we'll be in to make sure there are going to be adequate mitigation measures to help protect those species if this plan does go through. Just a few great images of volunteers from Friends of Sonoyta Creek going out and checking the drainages and the spring sites in both Harshaw and Alum.
Okay, I'm going to pause for 1 second because we had a critical habitat question.
Okay.
Let me find it. The question was, what does it take to remove or retain an area in critical habitat, and is this species specific?
It is very species specific. And I'm going to post a link in the chat that's a fact sheet about critical habitat. There was a whole process that was done using with the jaguar recovery team, where they went through a process to initially designate for jaguar. There's a different process that's carried out for each specific species. And there's a whole range of different variables that are considered. Economic impacts of designating critical habitat are included in the decision making. So it is in no way designating a refuge or a safe space just for these species. It is a compromise looking at a balance of different values. So one of the issues is they look at whether there may be more harm done if the designation is made for a certain population, if they might be more in harm's way by putting them on the map. That's often used more for endangered plants, where if the critical habitat just makes them too vulnerable, then sometimes that's a reason why places may not be included. Or again, the economic argument, which has a pretty big influence on the results. So they can be updated over time, and certainly there have been many cases of legal challenges pushing back against the original designations, and they change and flow over time. To the best of my knowledge, there's still a petition from the Center for Biological Diversity for jaguar, and they've asked for an expansion of jaguar critical habitat, especially to the north in Arizona. So these are dynamic mapping processes, and definitely check out that PDF link I shared in there. It does help explain more what it is and what it isn't.
Yeah, and one thing I'll add, the critical habitat, like the Mexican spotted owl critical habitat in the Patagonias, becomes important because we're talking right now about the NEPA process as it relates to the Forest Service part of the project. So what's happening on Forest Service land and their piece of doing analysis. But there are many other components of permitting and review for a mining project like this. And one of them will be a biological opinion from the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service related to threatened and endangered species in the area and critical habitat. So it is an important tool in terms of creating that nexus for consultation with the Fish and Wildlife Service, and that will be another opportunity for public engagement down the road. I see a question about objections. I'm going to come back to the NEPA process in a minute. I just want to talk really briefly about the economic situation and the reality of economic drivers in Santa Cruz County, because I'm sure you have all heard the sort of jobs versus the environment argument that comes up with these mining projects. So the health and economic prosperity of this community of southeastern Arizona, Santa Cruz County, particularly the town of Patagonia, are tied very deeply to the well-being of the Patagonia Mountains and the Harshaw and Sonoyta Creek watershed. Those watersheds are sources of drinking water for the town. They contribute to clean air, soil, and the biological wealth that really drives the local economy. There was a study put together recently, 2021, about looking at nature-based restorative economy in Santa Cruz County. So looking at how nature and nature-based industries are contributing to the economic health of the county. And you can see the nature-based restorative economy is supporting a lot of jobs, 779 jobs, 31.1 million in county GDP, and 76.6 million in sales in Santa Cruz County. So it's not like wealth, human prosperity, and well-being are not coming from keeping nature thriving and intact. Nature-based tourism is a big part of this. There's beautiful protected areas near Patagonia that people specifically go to visit to look at birds, lots of hiking opportunities. Even the nature-based industries, which include things like the wining production in the county. So there's just a lot going on that relies on intact ecosystems, and that really benefits the county as a whole in terms of economy. And just generally, outdoor recreation along waterways in Arizona generates 13.5 billion annually. This is a look at the Sonoyta Creek, where it ends at the state natural area where there's a reservoir. So this is more than all of mining in the state. So this is a really important part of our economy as well. And this is a renewable resource, right? If we keep waterways healthy, we keep the watersheds in Patagonia healthy, people can continue to use them long into the future. If they turn into that photo we saw of the current mining operations in Harshot Canyon, it's not, it's very different. So just wanted to address that issue. We will be bringing this up as well in our scoping comments. So back to this lovely chart. So again, we're in scoping. A question came up about objections. So as we move through a public scoping comments and then a comment period at the draft environmental impact statement, somebody asked if you needed to comment during these periods to be able to object. The answer is yes, you do. So it's important to stay engaged throughout the process. The objection period is really, there was a specific question about what you're objecting to. What you're actually objecting to is what the agency has put forward, either in terms of their analysis is inadequate, they didn't do what they were supposed to according to the law, those kinds of things. They didn't address the comments that you and issues that you raised earlier in the process. So lots of steps here. This, we'll be talking to you about this over the next couple of years. And we didn't cover really all the other components that come in, like state permits for around water and the biological opinion that we did mention with the Fish and Wildlife Service. So there'll be a lot of opportunity to get engaged. I'm going to just skip that. So let's just go through the reminder of what you can do, and then we can answer more questions if folks have specific questions. So Rick has shared the link in the chat, and I'm sure he'll do it again right now for you to follow, where we have a easy to fill out form for you to submit comments to the Forest Service during scoping. Just a friendly reminder that the strategy here is to raise issues, and that's what we'll be doing as organizations as well. We are not doing the analysis for them right now. They need to do their environmental impact analysis and put out the environmental impact statement, and then we'll really be getting into the nitty-gritty of whether that was adequate or not. The issues we're raising in that comment letter that we've created for you include biodiversity, water, cumulative impacts, recreation and nature-based economy, and imploring them to do proper due diligence for this very complex project under the FAST-42 system. And then I'll let you talk about volunteer opportunities, Emily. I mean, you've kind of covered them, but go ahead and reiterate whatever you'd like.
Yeah, I mean, personally, this is an area I care so much about, and I want to help stand up for all of the species and the communities that are going to be impacted all of this. So sometimes the best thing to do is to volunteer. Like I've gone through, there's ways to get involved in Spring Seeker. There's an upcoming spring snail survey campaign that's coming up in June, and Rick posted the link to register for that. Photofauna, checking wildlife cameras, if you would like to even just help with analyzing other people's photos. If you need something that's more office-based, there's opportunities for that, both with old Spring Seeker data and Photofauna photos that are coming in. And just continue to watch. Everything we can think of that we can do to be out there on the ground, collecting data that we hope will help hold the mine accountable and share additional information to the regulating agencies. We're going to do that. So stay tuned for more, and you're welcome to email us at any time if you have particular skills or knowledge about species or insight into information that may be useful as we prepare to respond to the EIS next year. Let's just keep an open line of communication about all of those things. And here's our contact information listed on this slide.
Well, thank you. We will do some Q&A now. I've got one more question queued up that I didn't address yet, but this is just, I don't know if you've been out there, this is a really special place in the world. I love the Patagonias. I've spent a lot of time out there. We're going to do our best to keep you informed and do what we can to stop this project, or as Emily said, do the best we can to try to mitigate and get all this good information into the record and into play in terms of making a case for keeping these mountains intact and these species safe.
Yeah.
Go
I've
ahead.
seen a few comments, and
Yep.
coming straight to me about accessibility of this information. So we will
Yeah.
be posting the recording likely by the end of the day on our website. We will email that all out to all of you. Probably we can make key slides also available in a readable format on the same webpage. The link on how you submit your comment letters that will all get emailed out to you if you didn't catch that in the chat already. And one thing that's also really helpful is just to help amplify this, as Louise mentioned, sharing it with people you know. People can comment, from other parts of Arizona. People can engage. This is really a global treasure. So the more people we can encourage to participate, the better in this process. And you don't need to give the expert information around lists of species and things like that. Just raising the issue, as Louise said, biodiversity matters, dark skies matter, springs matter. And then we want them to do this analysis properly is the key here. We will have more nitty-gritty responses next year when we're further along in the process.
I did see one comment on, I just want to acknowledge it, about the region being upheld as a diversity hotspot and talking about how it compares to other mountain ranges or other regions. I don't know the answer to exactly how that compares off the top of my head, but the point is noted in terms of how special the Patagonias are.
There's a question about access. If you're interested in visiting springs that are on Forest Service land, we can certainly give you more information about that. The land that's privately owned by the mining company is not open to the public, as far as I know.
Yeah, that's true. I see a question about where can I go to see the actual land to mine? I'm not sure I'm following the question. Todd, if you want to clarify in chat what you're asking, or jump on with your sound. And then I see you're asking, is anyone in favor of the mine? I mean, I'm sure there's people in favor of the mine. The town of Patagonia is currently working. They are not, I mean, they're not supporting this in terms of the economics and the community and the water source. So the town of Patagonia and the county of Santa Cruz have been doing a lot of work around trying to work with the mine in terms of mitigating what they expect to be a project that's going to go forward. So that's a pretty non-specific answer, Todd. I'd be happy to chat more too about that.
Thank you, Louise. Can you hear me, Louise?
Yeah.
Oh, the question is just, I'm not familiar with Patagonia Mountains well enough, but just where this mine is planning to develop, where is it going? I'm just not, I don't know if there's an aerial view. I came to the meeting late, so I'm not sure if you actually had that on the first 30 minutes of the presentation.
Yeah, I mean, I had a general map up. I can send you some more specific information on the mapping of where.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah,
Yeah,
sure.
it's due south of the town of Patagonia. And if you look on a topo map or something, you're looking for the Haw-Shaw Creek drainage and Allen Creek. Those sort of are a V from the center of where the pumping will happen.
Okay, any other questions before I thought you guys would be a font of questions, but you've got it sorted. All right. I'm not seeing anything else coming up in the chat. So thank you so much for your time. Go submit your comments. Stay tuned. We will keep you informed over the coming year about what's next, and maybe see you out at a spring in the Patagonias.
Yeah, thank you all.